Hello, friends. Welcome to the Wise Practice podcast. I am Laura Long. I am your host for today. Whitney so graciously let me do a podcast takeover. So I'm excited to get to talk to you today about multiple income streams. So today I wanted to really lay the groundwork for those of you who have been in private practice for quite some time and you're starting to maybe twiddle your thumbs a little bit and you're wondering, what's next for me? What is something that maybe I can do, whether it's directly related to the client work that you do, or it's slightly adjacent, or it's completely new and different. Maybe there's just something that's rattling around in your brain and you're wondering, what do I do with this? And so I hope that today's episode can give you some ideas of what those things might be. If you're someone that's still not quite sure, what are the different income streams that you might be able to bring into your practice? And I hope that I can give you some tangible tools and action steps so that when you're done with this episode, you can actually go out there and start taking some meaningful action on whatever idea that you might have. I think that this comes up for therapists a lot because sometimes our work can be really heavy. And if you've been in private practice for any meaningful amount of time, whether you're a solo practitioner or you're in group practice, you have experienced the ebbs and flows of private practice, the months where maybe there aren't as many calls coming in, or months where you don't want to be in the office seeing clients and you'd love to have a little bit more flexibility in your schedule. Or maybe you're just wanting to see less one-on-one clients and you've been given some talents beyond the therapy room. And so in this point in your career, you might be wondering to yourself, is this it? Or am I maybe being called to more? This isn't a bad thing. It doesn't mean that you're burned out and that you need to stop seeing clients altogether. It simply just means that you might be in a season of growth or evolution, and you're wanting to step into that, but not quite sure what that means or how to even do it. So I wanted to share just briefly a little bit more about my backstory for those of you who don't know who I am, or maybe don't know all the different ways that I myself have gone about creating alternative income streams for myself over the years. Now, when I started in private practice, it was about 2013, 2014. And in my mind, that was it for me. That was the dream that I had always had, was to be in private practice. So I couldn't even envision a life of anything other than getting to go to the office and see clients day in and day out. That was something that was always a dream of mine. And the fact that I got to live it at, in my mind, such a young age. I was still in my 20s when I started my private practice. I thought that that was the icing on the cake for me. And it's funny talking about it now in hindsight, because it wasn't maybe 2 years later when I was thinking, okay, what next? What can I do now? I'm enjoying the work still, but there's something missing. And I'd always enjoyed supervision. I was a recipient through and through. I loved reading and learning. I was just this endless student. And to this day, I love to learn new things. And so luckily, my supervisory experience has always been really pleasant. I've had wonderful supervisors over the years. And so I looked into what it would take to become a clinical supervisor in my state. And so at that time, after being in private practice for a few years, I went through the process of becoming an approved supervisor, so that other people could see me for their supervision hours so that they could become licensed. And that was such a rewarding and long experience. It wasn't something that I could just decide one day to become a supervisor and fill out an application, cut a check, and go about doing supervision. Every state is a little different, but in my state, I had to take additional coursework. I myself had to re-enter into a supervisory relationship, which is called supervision of supervision. Kind of cool, very meta. And it took about maybe 18 months or so from the time I decided I wanted to become a supervisor until I was actively supervising interns and associates in my state. And again, that work was so rewarding. And I didn't enter into it because I wanted an alternative income stream or because I wanted to earn more money necessarily. It was just another interest of mine, another passion that I wanted to explore. And I was lucky enough to get to do that. And I still, to this day, am a clinical supervisor in South Carolina where I live. Now, after doing supervision for a couple of years, it's almost like when you give a mouse a cookie. So after doing supervision for a few years, I noticed that a lot of the associates I was working with wanted to start their own private practices, and they would often come to me and ask me for guidance or assistance on what forms do I need, or what are the steps involved? How do I get an LLC? Just some of the basic nuts and bolts. And I found myself, freely giving all this information that I had accumulated over the years, mostly through the School of Hard Knocks and learning from my own mistakes. I also had friends who were other clinicians in the area calling me or sending me emails asking to take me out for coffee or lunch to ask me questions because they were wanting to leave their group practice setting or their community mental health setting, and they wanted to venture out into the world of private practice. So after enough times of people saying like, wow, you're really good at this, or this has been so helpful, thank you, I thought, well, what if I just put out all of this information together and maybe I can do something with it? Now, I didn't know at the time what those options were, but I at least thought, okay, maybe I can. This was before the e-course boom. It was roughly around 2016, 2017, I would say, when I got this like wild hair. And I started putting things together in what started to take the shape of a curriculum. And I reached out to my supervisor of supervision, who had also been my previous supervisor. We were very close. And she was the program director of the local university where other marriage and family therapists trained. And I approached her and essentially I pitched an idea for a one-time class where I could teach people about private practice and how to get started. And she agreed. She allowed for me to come. And I think I either did a guest lecture or maybe I just taught a mini mester. And we were sort of just testing and validating to see whether there was a need or a desire for this information. And oh my goodness, there was. The students got a lot out of it. I got a lot out of it. I learned so much about the questions that people have, because by then I had been in private practice for a few years. And what I ended up doing with that course is I also pitched it to my alma mater. And so then I started teaching this course at not just one university, but two as an adjunct professor, which is really cool because I always thought that you have to have a PhD in order to teach at the graduate level. And it turns out you don't. So at that point, I was still seeing clients in my private practice. I was providing supervision, and now I was adjunct teaching. You would think that I would have stopped at that point, but no. And so I won't bore you all with the details, but I did end up pursuing business consulting at that point. And so I took all the knowledge that I had gained, both personally through my own venture into private practice, but also teaching students. And I took all of this information and turned it into an online course. And oh man, that turned into like an 8-year amazing, wild journey into online entrepreneurship. So I learned all about online courses and building an audience and social media marketing. It was a wild ride, folks. I got to do in-person retreats and masterminds virtually. I got to travel the world, literally. It was just an incredible experience. Um, and everything else sort of had to become part-time in order for me to really pursue this online entrepreneurship of business coaching. I approached Whitney and said, hey, I like doing the business coaching stuff. I don't know if I love all that other stuff that I had to do. And I miss my clients and I miss doing supervision. So why don't I just work for you? And so here I am. I haven't been keeping track, but that's a lot of income streams. I haven't even mentioned the fact that I sublet office space, but I'm just one of those people that can't keep my hands still. So I'm here today to help you understand a little bit more about the different options that are available to you if you're curious about adding an income stream to your practice. And I hope that this can be a really valuable resource for you. Something that I want to make sure that I tell you all up front, though, before I start diving into different ideas, is I really want to set expectations. There's a lot of messaging online from content creators and people who are putting together courses or any sort of group to help you grow an online business. And the words passive income are littered all over social media. I don't know about your news feed, but it's like every other coach or consultant in any industry, not just the mental health space, talks about passive income. And after a decade of exploring other income streams, I just want to be really honest with you guys that in our field, that's not really how this works. Every single income stream that I'm going to talk about requires time, energy, effort, and a desire to serve in a different way. So it's not less work, it's just different work. And I wanted to be really clear about that up front because I'm not the person that's going to, I am going to tell it like it is. I'm not going to say, oh, yeah, it's super easy. Just do this and this, and then it's done. Anything that we talk about today is going to take work. It's going to take time, possibly time away from your work or time away from your family to set up. And passive income, the only thing that I can think of in my mind that's truly passive is being independently wealthy and probably just putting your money in the stock market and living off of the dividends that you get. That is probably the most passive thing I can think of. And that's not what we're talking about today. So now what I want to do is go through a few different options of what types of income streams a therapist might pursue. Now, I do want to give you just a simple filter as you're listening through some of these ideas, because the goal here is not to do everything. It's just to notice what resonates with you. So as I share some of these ideas with you today, I want you to ask yourself, what feels energizing? What feels heavy or draining? Where do people already come to you for your help? Like in my example, there were clinicians in my community, my friends who were coming to me and saying, how can I start my private practice? What's the best way? What's the easiest way or the simplest way? And then I would offer them support. They would go out and do the thing and then report back and say, oh my gosh, it worked. So I got a lot of positive feelings, a lot of feelings of just reward and fulfillment from being able to help my fellow friends and colleagues start their own businesses. And so, where in your life are people already coming to you? And I don't mean necessarily clients. Obviously, they're coming to you for mental health support or relationship support, but other people like your friends, your family members. What are the things that people consistently come to you and ask you for help on? And it might be surprising to you if those things are not necessarily mental health related. So notice that. Another question that you can ask yourself while you're hearing me give these ideas today is, what do you find yourself naturally explaining or teaching to other people? What seems to come easy for you and maybe is a little bit more challenging to other people in your life? Notice that. And then another question is, what fits your current season of life? In the previous season of my life, I didn't have a child. And so I feel like I had all the time in the world to explore different opportunities as they came to me. And really, the world was my oyster. When I had a newborn, I was available, but in very short pockets of time. And in fact, I actually enjoyed, times when my baby was sleeping, or when she was at daycare, and I had time to really sit and do some focused work. But I also wasn't available during what most consider normal business hours because I was either with her or I myself was seeing clients. And so I found myself having a lot of time during the edges of each day, late in the evening when I was feeding, or early in the morning when I couldn't sleep. Those were times where I was able to create content or do research, market research, or find new ideas for things when it wasn't during, the normal day. Now my daughter is 10 and I'm a professional chauffeur. I take her everywhere and she has a lot of activities to do after school. And this is really fun. It's a great season of life for me. It's exciting. That also means though that I'm not as available. I can't work 8 to 5. My hours are a little bit more limited. And so the things that I choose to take on require me to set really good, firm boundaries with my time because my time isn't really mine as much anymore. I'm available, while she's in school, But after school, I'm taking her to her activities and I want to sit there and watch and be present for those things. And so the things that I say yes to now in the season of life are different than the things I said yes to just a few years ago, and are also going to be different from the things that I will be able to say yes to when she becomes more independent, or heaven forbid, when she starts driving in a few years and she's going to be doing her own thing. At that point, I might be able to take on additional tasks, or I might, choose a totally different path. So think about what fits in your current season of life. And honestly, another question would be, what keeps coming back? Like something that just keeps gnawing away at you and it keeps on coming back to your mind, even when you try to ignore it. That tends to be a pretty decent litmus test, because it could be that that's something that God is putting in you, that maybe the Holy Spirit is coming to you and saying, have you looked into this? Even though you're pushing it away and saying, no, it's not a good time. This isn't a right season of life for me to be doing this. And yet that thought keeps persisting. I want you to notice that and just pay attention to it. Okay, so with those questions in mind, let me walk you through a few directions that you might explore as a clinician. And this is by no means a comprehensive list, but what I did was put some ideas into 4 different categories just to start the conversation today. If you want a more exhaustive list, I've actually put together a free PDF that you can check out by visiting today's show notes. Now, just as a disclaimer, not only do you not need to do all of these things that I'm about to share with you, you shouldn't do all of these things, because that is a clear recipe for burnout. All I'm asking you to do today is notice what stands out. And maybe you've already thought of 1 or 2 of these ideas. That's great. Maybe I'm able to offer a few others that you haven't explored or haven't thought about. That's exciting. So category 1 is teaching or mentorship. You might be drawn to teaching or mentoring, such as supervision, like my story. That was something, my first foray into an alternate income stream was providing supervision. And it was a natural progression from the work that I was doing. So maybe becoming a supervisor yourself. If you are trained in a particular, maybe becoming a consultant in that modality and going through the steps of what that would require. Consultation groups are another option. Again, particularly if you are known in your area or in your community for a particular modality or working with a certain demographic, having a consultation group where other clinicians pay to learn from you. And it might not be in a supervisory context, it's more clinically focused. And you may or may not need to explore what that would look like in terms of the legal and ethical implications if you're needing to get additional training in order to become a verified consultant or an official consultant in whatever treatment modality you utilize. But you certainly don't have to do that for everything. If you're really, really good at treating OCD, and this is something that you feel like there's a strong need for in your community, or even on a larger scale, you can consider offering some paid consultation groups to other clinicians who are wanting to learn more about how to treat OCD, just as an example. And then also, if you're a networker, if you're someone who loves to connect people to each other, you could form a paid networking group, either in your community or based on the particular population that you treat or modality that you utilize. You could create or set up a paid networking group so that other clinicians who have something in common with each other can come together and meet one another. If you love developing other therapists, any of these in category 1 can feel just like a natural progression of your skill set. And you are not allowed to feel like an imposter here, because remember, you just need to be 1 step ahead of someone in order to take their hand and guide them. I sometimes will have therapists come to me and say, Laura, I want to be a supervisor, or I want to create some sort of paid consultation opportunity for other people because I feel really strongly about this population I serve. But who am I? Who am I to start something like that? Who am I to supervise or try to teach someone a clinical skill? And that's something where I really feel strongly that we undervalue our knowledge as therapists. All too often, we feel like what we know, everyone else already has that information, and it's just not true. So if there's something that you feel really strongly about and you think that you can serve another clinician, you can help them in a meaningful way, all you have to do is be 1 step ahead of them to take their hand. You don't have to know everything. And in fact, you can't know everything. That will come with time. And even then, you won't know everything. But you're going to learn alongside them. As long as you're one step ahead of someone, you can take them somewhere. Now, category 2 would be clinical expansion. Some therapists expand what they're already doing by offering different services within their practice under the same umbrella. So, one obvious answer that most clinicians think of when they're in this place would be starting a group practice or adding a location or just hiring more clinicians or changing their business model to accommodate hiring a clinician, whether it's a 1099 independent contractor or an employee. Today, I want to talk a little bit about other areas because that to me seems like almost the more obvious answer to a lot of clinicians, but not to all. Becoming a group practice owner was never in the cards for me, and it was never something that piqued my interest. And so today, I want to talk more about other ways that a clinician can add to their clinical services without necessarily starting a group practice. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there are plenty of podcast episodes that Whitney has done, and she can speak way more intelligently about the practice of starting a group practice. Okay, so some other ways that you can expand your clinical work would be intensives or extended session offerings. So if you find that the work you do is more in depth, maybe you're someone who does a lot of trauma work, you're doing EMDR, or you do really intensive couples counseling like EFT, emotionally focused therapy, you can offer extended sessions for deeper work or even intensives. And intensives, I feel like, are all the rage right now because so many clinicians are seeing the results. Clients are making progress more quickly. They're able to go deeper in a longer period of time rather than having to see their therapist once a week for 50 minutes. And it's like right as you feel like you're really getting somewhere, the session is over. So something as simple as extending your sessions to 75 or 90 minutes, or even making that a standard practice in your business instead of having 50-minute sessions, having all of your sessions be extended. Or you can add an offer of doing an intensive. If you have office space available, or if you want to do it virtually, you can do an intensive for a half day, a full day, a weekend. Really, the world is your oyster at that point. And so I think that can be a really effective way to expand what you're already doing, what you're already naturally good at. And one of my consulting clients put it really well. She said, I'd rather work with fewer nervous systems for as long of a period of time than multiple nervous systems. It's always a little bit more heavy, depending on the type of work that you're doing, to work with a lot of nervous systems in one day. Whereas if you're doing an intensive, you might only be working with one or two nervous systems in a day or in a weekend. Another thing that you could do for clinical expansion would be creating a niche-based process or support group. Depending on the type of work that you do, it might be that there's a need in your community for a support group. I once did a support group for women going through separation and divorce, and that group ended up lasting over 2 years. And I thought it was just going to be a 6-week group, but the same group of women loved coming together and supporting each other. And so even though a few would leave or a few would join over the 2-year period, it was the same core group of women. And it was such an enjoyable and rewarding experience for me, and I hope for them as well. So if there's a particular demographic that you would love to serve, or if you notice a need in your area, maybe there's a need for a grief support group, for example, you could offer something like that. And that's something that would be a great way to expand your clinical work without you having to start a completely different business. Lastly, another thing that you can do, which I very briefly mentioned I also do, is to sublet office space. If you're in a larger suite and you have access to other offices within that suite that maybe aren't being used, or even your own office, if you're part-time or if there are certain days consistently that you're not using your office, you might be able to reach out to a few trusted colleagues and find another therapist who is actually looking for an office during the exact days or times that you're not in there anyway. And so while this might not be the most lucrative option, it can help offset the cost of your rent. And I've really enjoyed this because in my practice, I have 7 other clinicians that I can refer to, that I can chat with. They've become friends of mine. And I also, the control freak in me, gets to operate the space in a way that I see fit. And so I've been able to decorate it the way that I want to, and I have a nice drink station set up for clients and for the clinicians who sublet from me. I also get to have more say so, obviously, in who I'm surrounding myself with, because when someone expresses interest in subletting, I sit down with them and it's not really like a formal interview process, but we have a conversation. And I want to make sure that the dynamic and the vibe, if you will, of the space is going to work for everyone, which has felt really great. It's been rewarding, and I love getting to meet other clinicians in my area who have different areas of specialization, and we're able to refer to one another. So subletting office space is another great option within that clinical expansion category. These ideas all keep you close to clinical work, but in a slightly different format. Now, category 3 is content and intellectual property. Some therapists feel pulled toward creating something new. That can be workshops, courses. These could be things that are more client facing or therapist facing. It could be writing a book or an entire curriculum. I once worked with a therapist who created an entirely new treatment modality that I thought was really interesting. And so I got to help walk her through the process. And I myself was learning along the way about how to get a modality approved, which was really fascinating. Another thing that you could do, which is what I've done before, is adjunct teaching. Like I said earlier, I didn't realize that you could serve as an adjunct instructor at the graduate level if you didn't have a PhD. That was something that I just always assumed you had to have. And that was never my intention to get a PhD. So I didn't really look into it. And it turns out that for a lot of master's degree programs, an adjunct instructor does not have to have a PhD. I think what's probably more important is that you have a connection, that you know somebody. And so an easy place to start would be if there's a local university in your area or in your town, and also your own alma mater, similar to what I did, where I pitched the idea of the course to my own alma mater, the program director there. And because we already had a relationship, it was a much easier sell than if I were to cold call or cold email the program director. So if you've ever thought to yourself, man, I wish I could teach this stuff to more people at the same time, then it might resonate with you to consider creating content or putting together workshops or courses or writing a book. And then category 4 is partnerships and consulting. You might not want to build something all by yourself. So forming a key strategic partnership with a church, a school, anyone who provides adjacent services to you, that might be a great way for you to dabble in an alternative income stream without feeling the weight or the pressure of having to build it by yourself. If you're a great team player, you love working with others, or if you already have an established relationship with another provider or another organization, you can partner together and put something together that's meaningful that can really help solve a need in your community. Also, consulting roles. And consulting can be similar to the work that myself and Whitney do, or we are providing business consulting if you're really into the business side of things when it comes to practice building or anything related to mental health. But consulting can look like a lot of different things. It can be that you're consulting with executives in more of a corporate structure. You can provide consulting to certain industries if you have kind of a working knowledge or you're very familiar with a particular industry. It doesn't have to be mental health related even. And so I think those would be probably the top 4 categories. Again, not an exhaustive list, but ideas just to start getting you thinking beyond the one-on-one work that you might find yourself doing and ready to explore something else. One thing that I want to make sure that I talk about is kind of going back to this idea of, is it the right season? You know, I mentioned that in my own life, there were certain seasons where I could devote time to something like this, and there have been other seasons where maybe I couldn't. And I think that would be a really good thing for you to discern if you're thinking about starting an alternative income stream, is asking yourself, what do I have in terms of time, financial resources? Because anything that you build is going to take time, and it's most likely going to require some amount of an investment, whether big or small, but just checking in with yourself. There are 3, what I would consider green lights, that if you can say yes to these things, these 3 things, it might be the right time or the right season for you to explore an alternative income stream. Number one would be that your caseload is stable, or at least that your business is operating in a way that feels stable. Because some of you might be a group practice owner and you don't manage a caseload. So, looking in a more meta level, does your business feel stable? If the answer is yes, then it might be a great time for you to explore another business model, another opportunity, or just an alternative income stream. If your business or if your caseload doesn't feel stable, that's what we would call more of a stop sign or a warning to proceed with caution. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. Number two, as a green light, would be that you have financial breathing room. If you feel like you're living paycheck to paycheck, if you're having a hard time keeping your lights on at your office, if you're experiencing financial scarcity, anything that you create, anything new, is also going to come with its own fears. And there might be some scarcity there about, like, is this thing going to work, or can I really build this? So when you're experiencing scarcity in your existing business, in your primary business, while you're building something new and also experiencing some fear and scarcity there, it can overwhelm the system. Really, it can. So if you are in a place where you have a little bit of financial breathing room, that is also going to give you more space to explore, to get creative and playful with whatever it is that you're building. It's going to allow you to be experimental and not feel rushed or like there's this sense of urgency. And then the third green light would be that you have both energy and curiosity about this thing that you're thinking about building. If you find yourself thinking about it or brainstorming ideas, or you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't sleep because you're thinking about it, anything like that where it's taking up room in your mind and you're curious, but you're also excited, that would be something to notice and to take a pause, because it might mean that you're onto something. If it's something that just keeps kind of nagging away at you, I have an idea right now that, it's like nagging. Even if I try to push it away, it just keeps coming up. And so I'm like, okay, Lord, I will listen and I will just kind of explore this and be creative about what this can look like. And I'm going to start kind of small with it. So that's something that I would invite you to do as well. Okay, now 3 stop signs or warning signs to proceed with caution. One would be if you're in a place where you're feeling desperate for income. Mike Michalowicz, the author of Profit First, he refers to this concept in his book that he calls the survival trap. And I wish I had time to unpack that whole phenomenon with you today, but if you've never heard of it, go check out the book. The survival trap is basically when, as entrepreneurs, we find ourselves in a place of financial desperation and we just start looking for fast money. So, what Mike Michalowicz says in his book is, instead of being the world's best at one thing, we end up doing a greater variety of things and becoming less and less efficient at each step, while our business becomes harder to manage and costlier to run. So, you really want to avoid the survival trap at all costs. The second warning sign or stop sign would be if you are wanting to pursue an alternative income stream with the hope that this will fix your potential burnout. Anything new that you do is going to require more of you, more of your time, more of your energy, and more resources. And so if you're already operating from a place of lack, if you are feeling like you're dancing on the edge of burnout, now might not be the best time to pursue an alternative income stream, even though you probably daydream about it, because maybe the work that you're doing is feeling really exhausting. So this would actually be more of a time of reflection, and maybe even going to a counselor, to a therapist, to talk through what your options would be. But I would probably not recommend you exploring an alternative income stream at this point. And then the last kind of stop sign or warning sign would just be if you already feel overextended in your life, if you have a lot of other obligations, if you're leading a Bible study and you're also the room mom for your child's school, you're taking your kids everywhere. If you have a lot of roles beyond your work as a clinician and you feel a bit spread thin, then starting an alternative income stream is only going to exacerbate those feelings. Now, I do want to give you a little bit of encouragement that If any of those warning signs or stop signs were yeses for you and you're like, oh, dang it, I really want to consider putting this new thing together or starting this thing, but I am feeling desperate for money, or I am feeling a sense of urgency, and I am feeling a little burned out or overextended. I want to let you know that you don't have to rush this, but you also don't have to ignore it. So there are some ways that you can still even brainstorm or journal on these ideas that you have, while also trying to get your place, your private practice at least, in a place where you're feeling more energized, not overextended, and maybe feeling a little bit more financially secure, at which point you can explore this other option. All right, so now I'm going to wrap up by just giving you some ideas on what you can do now. So let's say you've been listening to this episode and you're really feeling excited. You were like jazzed about a couple of the ideas that either I shared or ones that have already been rattling around in your mind. What I would say is number one, just pick one or two ideas to start with, max. Don't go making an extensive or exhaustive spreadsheet of all the different ideas because you're just going to overwhelm yourself. Pick one or two things right now, today, that feel the most energizing or exciting to you. And then start to do just a tiny little bit of market research. Don't over research this, but a few things that you might want to look into is, are there other people doing this? And actually, if there are, that's a good thing because it means that there's likely demand for the idea that you have. If you go out and you think, oh man, I have an idea for this really cool course that I don't see anyone else doing, that would actually give me pause because it might mean that there's just not a demand for that particular thing. So when you're doing a little bit of research, you want to find other people who are doing at least a version of what it is that you might want to do. And it doesn't mean that they have to already be doing it in your neighborhood or in your community, but just the fact that something like this or something that's adjacent to this already exists. I would want to see that. Another thing would be to just start paying attention. What are people telling you, either in the therapy room or in your friend group? What are people telling you are your strengths, something that you're naturally good at? What are people coming to you and saying, oh gosh, you're so good at this thing. I wish I had that skill or that talent or that gift. And then lastly, I would say that it's important to keep a child's mind at this stage. When I watch children playing at the playground, I can't help but notice that even when a child doesn't really know what a certain toy or piece of equipment is supposed to be used for, they don't seem to care. Kids just get on these pieces of equipment and just start messing around with stuff and jumping on it just to see what it does, but they're not cautiously going up to a piece of playground equipment and going, oh no, I don't know exactly how this thing works. I'm not touching it. And yet, when we become adults, we seem to have that mentality when it comes to pursuing something new. We overanalyze, over research, and then we don't take any action. It's just analysis by paralysis. And I want to encourage you to take a child's mind with whatever this idea or ideas are that have come up for you today. You don't have to know how to do everything. You have to know how to start a YouTube channel. You don't have to know how to start a course or a curriculum or become the best supervisor in your craft. You don't have to know those things. You will learn as you go. So don't let the not knowing stop you from doing what you might be being called to do. You might be being called to more. And it's important for you to think about, reflect on, pray, journal, but don't just get stuck in the idea that because you're not an expert or because you don't know all the 400 steps that you're supposed to do to make this thing happen, that you can't take some action now. Treat it like a piece of playground equipment. Mess with it, play around with it, experiment with it, be playful and inquisitive. Notice what feels light and notice what feels heavy, and notice what keeps coming back. All right, so I'm going to start wrapping up for today, but if you have been listening to this episode and thinking to yourself, okay, Laura, I'm ready to actually explore this, but I don't want to do it alone, then I want to tell you about a brand new 6-month experience that I'm going to be facilitating starting this summer, June of 2026, called the Called to More Mastermind. In this virtual mastermind group, I'm going to help a small group of clinicians discern their direction, design a simple first offer, and actually begin building the thing that they've been thinking about. Now, this isn't going to be a step-by-step blueprint because everyone who joins is going to probably have a different idea of something that they want to build out. And that's what makes this so exciting and so thrilling, because this is going to be a space for thoughtful, supported experimentation while also giving you some guardrails and letting you know what things have worked, not just for me, but for other people, and helping you maybe to avoid some painful lessons along the way. So if you want to learn more, if this sounds interesting to you, just visit wisepracticeconsulting.com/mastermind, or you can check out today's show notes for the link, and you can check out the information page and learn just a little bit more about what we're going to be doing together. All right, I'm going to wrap up, but just so you know, I want to close by letting you know that you don't have to have everything figured out today. You just have to be willing to take the next step. I'd love to take that next step with you, friends, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.